what do you claim, Andrew, that the police did wrong against you in their actions?
Well, I mean, Stephen, this summer, the Independent Office for Police Conduct actually upheld my review against the police. And for me, that's vindication. And as a part of that process, I had to first complain to the Metropolitan Police, and they should have actually had my complaints investigated by the Department for Professional Standards in a formal investigation, but they absurdly gave it to the very local unit I was complaining about, and naturally they conducted an internal whitewash, cleared themselves, and then put out a press release last summer. I'm also autistic, and I made a disability discrimination claim against them, and they ignored that. But I mean, Stephen, the IOPC report, it's quite long. It's very healing for me to read it because, you know, everywhere the Independent Office of Police Conduct is ruling against me. But, you know, some of the complaints I made, which the IOPC takes the police for, you know, to task over, is the ignoring. I made over 50 complaints, and they only investigated 3 minor ones, and then ignored the rest. Officers at the highest level, including Cressida Dick, should be investigated. The leaks of such documents are normally addressed on work premises by civil servants. The involvement of the counterterrorism police and the whole approach to the arrest was unprecedented and not proportionate. Neil Boss, the assistant commissioner, threatened to arrest and prosecute journalists. I mean, the list is quite endless, and the police just ignored all that and cleared themselves. And I'll just finish with this, Stephen. The police, because we'd be here all day going over that very brilliant report the IOPC gave me, but the police told my witnesses to go away and not contact them. They stated in writing that they were not going to consider any of my evidence, but only evidence of the counterterrorism police and my enemies in the civil service. And this really is Soviet-style behavior. And so I'm very pleased with the decision by the IOPC, and the report mentions that the police did a risk assessment the day before they raided my home with 14 fully armed counterterrorism police officers who broke down the front door and trashed my flat and took me from my post-cancer surgery sickbed to Southwark Police Station. And the risk assessment that I got released to me, not from the police, but because the police have refused me all documents, but I got released from the Crown Prosecution Service. It says, the subject, you know, has no firearms, no knives, no weapons, drugs, infectious persons, infectious articles, hazardous substances, dangerous animals, you know, unsafe structure, no criminal record. And that was made the day before they raided my home. So why on earth did they need to raid my home with 14 counterterrorism police officers?
I know that one of your claims is that the police questioned your politics during their handling with you. Why do you think they did that, and how did they explain that?
Yes, I was questioned about how I voted, and I knew this was unlawful. The counterterrorism police asked me how I voted specifically and how I voted in the Brexit referendum. And I read law at Oxford, and I previously worked in the human rights field. So I exercised, Stephen, my rights, and I refused to tell them. And I reminded them that they were not supposed to ask me that, and I said you're not allowed to ask me what my voting habits are, and I said what does this have to do with any of the allegations, or what do any of your irrelevant questions have to do with Kim Darroch's crimes of leaking U.S. state secrets to a CNN journalist in exchange for sexual favors, as my lawyers have argued in court. And at that point, they looked at the ceiling, they looked at the floor, they got very nervous. And I should actually just tell you, with regards to my voting habits, I'm happy to tell you that I actually did not vote for Brexit. Indeed, prior to working for the Department for International Trade under Antonio Romeo, I worked actually in Washington for a Democrat member of Congress who represent part of San Francisco, which is probably the most left-wing place in America. In fact, as I worked on human rights issues for those very liberal Democrats, and sadly, I just don't think that fit the narrative that the civil service tried to spin when they referred me to the counterterrorism police. Their narrative was that Kim Darroch is an innocent victim who had his documents leaked by a far-right Brexiteer, and given his leaked documents, had over a 35,000 person distribution list dating in 2017 before I even worked for the civil service. Good luck finding that person. And as my documents state, Theresa May, my court documents state, Theresa May contacted Cressida Dick and demanded that the Met find someone. And my enemies in civil service, whom I'd actually previously reported for bullying, I mean, they were all too happy to offer me up. And they asked me, and the police asked me why my civil service colleagues would accuse me of this.
What about this image of you with Jacob Rees Mogg? Is it right that the police produced a selfie that they'd taken from Facebook?
Yes, and I can give you that selfie. I had been at an event, and after he gave a speech, he was a government minister at the time, I think it was the Cabinet Office, and I asked a question about the Northern Protocol, which was quite topical given Brexit and all that, and he answered the question, gave the sort of typical government line one would expect, and as he was leaving, I said, Minister, can I have a selfie? He said, oh, of course, sure. And we had a selfie, and I was actually, after the police confiscated my phone and gave all my electronic equipment to GCHQ, they were really clutching for straws. They couldn't find anything to link me to the Darroch leaks. And so they started going for personal stuff. And they're like, why would you have your picture taken with such a person, someone who's so far on the right, etc. And I just, they kept, I'd actually sent the picture to my goddaughter, actually, and said, oh, guess who I met today, ha. Something as innocuous as that. I didn't think much of it, and I just explained the context of how the photograph was taken, and I said, again, I guess I would always, end that conversation by saying, what on earth does anything have to do, what does this have to do with Kim Darroch? But again, they were trying to paint me in a particular political light to fit their narrative that they were trying to build.
What are your future plans in regards to the civil service and the police?
Well, I should say that after the police investigation failed, the offers for book deals started to come in. And so I'm writing a book to be published in the United States where it cannot be blocked under UK counterterrorism laws. And I'm naming and shaming the guilty. If Kim Darroch, or anyone named in that, they're welcome to come and sue me in the US in an open court for that.
Now, I know that you've experienced a lot in these last few years after your arrest and your dealings with cancer, obviously, and all of these terrible health problems. What has kept you going throughout this ordeal?
I should actually say, I've been very fortunate to have resilient friends. But I mean, who helped me get through this. But even they were threatened and worried they were going to have their homes raided by the police. And when the police could not find any evidence of criminal behavior against me, they started to clutch for straws. And I said they even harassed my vicar's wife and asked her what we prayed about in my Anglican prayer group. And it appeared to us that they were trying to sort of maybe at that point, because they were so desperate to sort of paint me as something bad, try to paint me maybe as a religious extremist. Obviously, it's a case of religious discrimination, and none of this has anything to do with Kim Darroch and his documents or anyone's documents. But I really want to dwell a bit on what I went through. And when the British state actually cut me off from my bank accounts, they confiscated my wallet, all of my electronic equipment, my phone, all of my picture ID. They put me under house arrest. I mean, it became impossible to operate. I was suspended from my job and told by my accusers in the civil service that I could only communicate with my accusers and none of my allies in the civil service. And if I didn't have friends who, for example, delivered me groceries and paid my bills, I would not have survived. And as you mentioned, I was actually fighting a battle with cancer at the time, and sadly the British authorities even retaliated during that period and contacted my landlord in Mexico and got me thrown out of my flat during the pandemic, and I ended up in a homeless charity with heroin addicts and alcoholics. And interestingly, as I said, the police refused me all of my FOI requests for information. But the Crown Prosecution Service gave me hundreds of their documents, the police documents. And one of those documents actually revealed the very day the police dropped the bail, they emailed the court and confirmed that the reason for dropping the bail was the names of the people that I named in that public appeal document to the Crown Court. So looking back on it, Stephen, I should have done that 6 months before, but I was so traumatized and just, as I've said, trying to survive as I'm being attacked from all sides. I even, as you mentioned, I attempted suicide during that period. And then the civil service leaked that medical and confidence information and tried to get me sectioned under the Mental Health Act. It was just an unrelenting nightmare. And these people have behaved unconscionably. And if they think I'm going to simply walk away from this, they're dreaming.